Hello from the Weird Lab. Today we're going to explore what actually happens inside your body when you completely stop eating sugar for 30 days. Most people already know they shouldn't eat sugar, yet they still do. The real issue isn't awareness, it's motivation. The reason most people don't stick to it is because they don't have a strong enough reason that truly clicks for them. We often know what we should or shouldn't do, but without a deep understanding of the consequences, it rarely sticks. It's similar with exercise. Everyone knows it's important, but most people still don't do it consistently. And then there's the common situation in healthcare. Someone gets diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, or high blood pressure, and they're told to lose weight. On paper, that sounds simple. Lose weight and things improve. But at the same time, they're often given medications like insulin that can make weight loss even harder. That creates a frustrating cycle. So instead of just telling you what to avoid, let's build a real why. A strong reason. That makes sense of what's actually happening in your body. Because the real issue isn't just body weight, it's what you eat and how it affects your hormones. Sugar is one of the most powerful triggers in this system. It doesn't just add calories, it directly influences insulin. Over time, high sugar intake can lead to insulin resistance. It also drives cravings because sugar acts more like a substance that hijacks reward pathways than a normal food. It doesn't truly nourish you or keep you full in a lasting way. It pushes your brain to want more. When insulin resistance develops, your body shifts into a fat-storing state. Insulin is designed to store energy, and when it stays elevated too often, it blocks fat burning. That means your body can't efficiently access stored fat for fuel. So even if you have plenty of energy stored, your system behaves like it's running low. That mismatch often leads to persistent hunger and stronger cravings. This is also why insulin resistance is closely linked to weight gain and obesity. When your body is constantly storing fat and struggling to use it, and when cravings push you to eat more than you need, the cycle reinforces itself. But the deeper issue isn't just weight gain, it's the metabolic disruption underneath it. Insulin resistance is also strongly connected to inflammation, and inflammation is a key driver in many chronic health conditions. So the real chain reaction looks like this. Sugar increases insulin problems drive inflammation and cravings, and together they contribute to disease and weight gain. Sugar sits at the center of that process. What's important to understand is that this isn't just about calories. The number of calories alone doesn't explain what's happening in the body. The quality of those calories matters much more because different foods trigger completely different hormonal responses. Sugar has a very different effect on the body compared to whole nutrient-dense foods. Now, when you remove sugar from your diet, one of the first things people notice is a change in oral health. Teeth often feel cleaner, and over time there tends to be fewer cavities and less gum inflammation. Even plaque buildup can reduce. To understand why, you have to look at how bacteria in the mouth feed. Starches like flour, rice, and similar foods break down into glucose. In your mouth, there's an enzyme called amylase that starts digesting these starches right away, turning them into simple sugars that bacteria can use as fuel. Sugar itself makes things even more intense. Table sugar or sucrose is made of glucose and fructose. Your body doesn't produce enzymes in the mouth to break it down, but the bacteria there do. That gives them direct access to fuel. Fructose contributes in a different way by creating more acidic conditions when bacteria process it, and that acidity can damage tooth enamel over time, creating small holes and decay. Meanwhile, the glucose component tends to be sticky, helping bacteria cling to the surface of teeth and form plaque more easily. So, when you remove sugar and significantly reduce refined carbohydrates, you're cutting off a major food source for these bacteria. That's why many people notice their mouth feels fresher and cleaner, even without constantly brushing. Over time, this simple change can have a noticeable impact not just on cravings and energy, but also on oral health and overall metabolic balance. Of course, stopping sugar doesn't mean you stop brushing your teeth. It just means your mouth feels naturally cleaner much more often, even between brushes. Think about that sticky, unpleasant film you feel on your teeth after eating certain foods. That sensation is very real, but it's mainly triggered by sugar and refined carbs. When you remove those from your diet, you'll notice something interesting. Foods like meat, eggs, and vegetables don't create that same sticky buildup. Your mouth simply doesn't feel as coated all the time. Another major benefit of cutting out sugar is a lower risk of gout. This is largely tied to fructose, which makes up about half of added sugar. Fructose increases uric acid production in the body. On top of that, fructose is strongly linked with insulin resistance and fatty liver, which further pushes uric acid levels even higher. When uric acid becomes too concentrated, it can form sharp crystals that settle in joints. These crystals can feel like tiny shards of glass, causing intense pain. The most common place people experience this is the big toe, but it can affect almost any joint. When sugar is removed, your hormonal system also starts to become more stable overall. The two biggest hormones involved here are insulin and cortisol. These are both emergency-style hormones. Cortisol kicks in during stress or fight-or-flight situations. Insulin responds to blood sugar spikes, which can also be treated by the body as urgent situations because extremely high or low glucose levels can be dangerous for the brain. Because these are priority hormones, when they are constantly activated, they tend to disrupt everything else. But when insulin and cortisol start to stabilize, other hormones naturally begin to balance out as well. One of the first noticeable changes from this hormonal stability is improved sleep. When blood sugar is steady, insulin doesn't have to constantly spike and crash, and cortisol also stays more controlled. That matters because cortisol directly interferes with melatonin, the hormone responsible for sleep. When cortisol is high at the wrong times, sleep quality suffers. When it's balanced, sleep becomes deeper and more consistent. Another sleep improvement comes from fewer nighttime bathroom trips. In cases like type 2 diabetes, excess glucose gets filtered through the kidneys, pulling water along with it, which leads to frequent urination. That obviously disrupts sleep. There's also an adjustment phase to consider. When you stop sugar and lower carbs, your body begins using stored glycogen for energy. Glycogen holds water, so when it gets used up, that stored water is released. Because of that, in the very beginning, especially the first night or so, you might actually urinate more than usual. But this phase is temporary and usually settles quickly. Brain function is another area that improves when sugar is removed. Insulin resistance can make it harder for glucose to properly enter cells, including brain cells. So the brain doesn't get a steady supply of fuel. On top of that, blood sugar spikes and crashes create an energy roller coaster, which directly affects focus, clarity, and mood. When you remove sugar, energy levels become more stable. And when energy becomes stable, mood often stabilizes too. This is why people frequently notice reduced anxiety, fewer emotional crashes, and in some cases even improvements in depressive symptoms. Eye health is also strongly affected by long-term sugar intake. High blood glucose is one of the leading causes of damage to the retina, the light-sensitive layer at the back of the eye. This area relies on extremely small blood vessels, which are very vulnerable to sugar-related damage. Sugar contributes to several harmful processes in these tiny vessels, including advanced glycation, oxidative stress, and chronic inflammation. It also damages the supporting structures around blood vessels and causes fluid imbalances that lead to swelling and weakening of vessel walls. Over time, these changes can cause leakage and thickening of the vessels, disrupting normal function. When this damage progresses, it can lead to microvascular disease in the eye, which is a major cause of vision loss. This condition, often called retinopathy, is one of the leading causes of blindness. Reducing or removing sugar significantly lowers this risk. The same type of microvessel damage doesn't just affect the eyes, it also affects the kidneys. The kidneys' filtering units rely on the same delicate network of small blood vessels. When those vessels are damaged, kidney function declines, which can eventually lead to failure. Nerves are also affected in a similar way. Poor microcirculation means nerves don't receive enough oxygen and nutrients. This leads to neuropathy, especially in the hands and feet, where symptoms like numbness, tingling, or loss of sensation are common. As nerve damage progresses, it can increase the risk of serious complications, including infections and even amputations, particularly in the toes and feet. One severe condition related to this is Charcot joints, where joints become so damaged that they may require surgical replacement or amputation, often affecting areas like the ankles or knees. A big reason amputations happen is loss of sensation. When nerves aren't functioning properly, you may not notice injuries like cuts, bruises, or fractures. That lack of feedback means injuries often go untreated or get worse over time. Even more concerning is that repeated injury is common because the area doesn't feel normal signals. There's also another layer called proprioception, which is your body's ability to sense joint position without consciously thinking about it. When this system is impaired, you lose awareness of how your joints are positioned, which leads to abnormal stress and further damage. On top of that, reduced blood flow slows healing and increases the risk of infection. All of these factors together can lead to serious long-term complications, including amputations and joint replacements. So when you look at the bigger picture, sugar is deeply involved in many of the most serious chronic conditions affecting vision, kidneys, nerves, and overall mobility. Removing it shifts the body away from that damage cycle. Immune function also improves when sugar is reduced. High sugar intake can weaken the activity of white blood cells, especially neutrophils, which make up a large portion of the immune system. These cells are responsible for engulfing and destroying harmful invaders like bacteria and viruses through a process called phagocytosis. Sugar interferes with that process, making immune defense less effective. Sugar also increases oxidative stress and chronic inflammation, both of which wear down immune efficiency over time. When the immune system is constantly dealing with low-grade inflammation, it becomes less responsive when real threats appear. Another issue is nutrient competition. Many vitamins and minerals rely on transport systems to move through the body and enter cells. High sugar intake can interfere with these transporters, making it harder for essential nutrients like vitamin C and amino acids to reach where they're needed. That affects everything from tissue repair to immune defense. And if you observe closely, many people notice a pattern. Colds or flu-like symptoms often show up after periods of high sugar intake or binge eating. Cutting out sugar can also make a noticeable difference in your skin. There's a strong link between high sugar intake and acne, so when you remove sugar, many people see fewer breakouts and calmer skin overall. It can also help reduce other inflammatory skin conditions, including different types of dermatitis. That said, it's important to understand something clearly. Sugar is a major contributor, but it's not the only cause of inflammation in the body. Many people today are dealing with other underlying issues such as allergies, autoimmune conditions, or gut imbalances like dysbiosis. Sugar can worsen all of these problems, but even after removing it, some people may still have lingering inflammation because of these other factors. So the goal isn't to assume sugar is the only cause, but rather to recognize that removing it is a powerful step in the right direction. When you stop eating sugar, one of the key changes in your body is improved insulin sensitivity. In simpler terms, your body becomes less insulin resistant. That's important because insulin resistance is essentially the early stage of type 2 diabetes, just on a spectrum of worsening metabolic health. By improving insulin sensitivity, you significantly reduce the risk of progressing toward type 2 diabetes. This shift also helps protect against non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Two major drivers of fatty liver are consistently high insulin levels and excess fructose intake, since the liver is the only organ that can process fructose. When it gets overloaded, fat starts building up. High blood sugar also forces more insulin production, which compounds the issue. So, by removing sugar, you reduce a major burden on the liver and lower the risk of fatty liver developing or progressing. Beyond the liver, cutting sugar also reduces overall inflammation in the body. This includes inflammation in the arteries, which lowers the risk of coronary artery disease and heart attacks. It can also improve cholesterol profiles, not necessarily by lowering total cholesterol in everyone, since genetics play a role there, but by improving the quality of those markers. When blood sugar is consistently high, it leads to the formation of advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These are harmful compounds formed when sugar binds to proteins in the bloodstream. They contribute to tissue damage and inflammation. At the same time, high sugar increases oxidative stress and promotes the formation of small, dense LDL particles, which are more strongly associated with heart disease risk. So, even if your total cholesterol number doesn't change dramatically, the internal risk profile often improves. The damaging particles decrease, inflammation drops, and the overall pattern becomes healthier. These changes can be measured more precisely through advanced blood tests like NMR lipid profiling, which looks at LDL particle size and number rather than just total cholesterol. Cutting out sugar can also reduce joint inflammation, which often leads to less stiffness and pain. Many people also experience meaningful and more sustainable weight loss. Unlike short-term diets that mostly cause water loss at the beginning, removing sugar helps address the underlying metabolic imbalance. That's what leads to more stable, long-term results instead of the typical cycle of losing and regaining weight. At this point, it becomes clear that this isn't just a short experiment, it's a 30-day reset. The idea is to remove all added sugar completely, along with refined white flour products like bread, pastries, and similar processed foods. It's also helpful to reduce or temporarily eliminate high-starch foods such as rice, oats, corn, and similar sources, at least during the challenge. However, the approach can be flexible depending on the individual. Not everyone needs to permanently avoid all starches. A useful way to judge your own response is to pay attention to how your body reacts. If a small amount of bread or rice feels fine and doesn't trigger cravings, then your body may tolerate it well. But if even a small amount leads to intense cravings for sugar or processed foods, that's a sign that those foods are not working in your favor right now. Understanding your own response is key. If someone takes on this 30-day challenge, the real value comes from observation and honesty. It's about noticing what changes in energy, cravings, mood, digestion, and overall health. And sharing that experience can also help others who are trying to make similar changes, since real stories often have more impact than theory alone. Beyond the health effects, one of the most surprising changes is in taste perception. When sugar is removed, your sense of taste becomes sharper. Flavors in natural foods become more noticeable and enjoyable. That's because sugar, when used heavily in processed foods, tends to overpower everything else. It masks the subtle flavors in real food and dulls your overall taste experience. Once it's removed, food begins to taste more complex and satisfying again. Simple meals start to feel richer and more enjoyable, and your appreciation for natural flavors increases significantly. Another major change is the reduction in cravings between meals. This is one of the most important factors for long-term success. Many people struggle not because they don't understand what to eat, but because cravings eventually push them back into old habits. When sugar is removed, those intense cravings often disappear and are replaced by genuine hunger for real, nourishing food. Instead of constant snacking or emotional eating, people often find themselves naturally eating fewer meals, sometimes settling into 2 meals a day without feeling deprived. Meals become more satisfying and there's less mental preoccupation with food between eating times. At that point, food stops being a source of constant temptation and becomes something simple, grounding, and stabilizing again.